Welcome back, students, to our class. So today we are talking about the CPU design. CPU design, what makes up a CPU, and that is what we are going to discuss today. So first of all, understand what CPU is. A CPU is a central processing unit. Is an electronic circuit within a computer that carries out the instructions of the computer programmed by performing the basic arithmetic logic, control, and input and output operation specified by the instructions. So these instructions now, they could be a program, they could be a human being, they could be inputs, they can come from anywhere else, as long as these are instructions that tells the computer on what to do. And the CPU is responsible of carrying out all these instructions and doing some basic performance, okay? So then talking of the CPU, so the CPU have three main components, okay? Like how we were talking about it already from the beginning of the course. So the CPU has three components. It's having a memory, which are the registers. Remember when we're talking about the memory and we spoke about the registers as well as the type of the registers, we said that this memory is actually within the CPU. It's on the CPU itself. Now, it's accompanied by the control unit. This is a control unit, as well as the ALU, which is Arithmetic Logic Unit. So that is what makes up a CPU. A CPU is not just one component to say. No, it's made out of different other components, okay? So the memory, like what I have said, this unit stores instructions, data, and of course, immediate results from the CPU. So once the CPU does the performance that it needs to do, those results then are within the CPU's memory, which are actually the registers. And of course, it interacts closely with the primary storage, mainly the RAM, okay, referring it to the both instructions and data. So that is actually what the memory within the CPU does. Okay, so we now comes to the other part, which is the control unit. So this unit controls the operations of all the computer, but does not carry out any actual data processing. So it does only control. Its job is to do the control of all the other parts within the computer. Okay, so it is responsible for controlling the transfer of data and instructions among other units of the computer. So it controls which data comes, which instructions comes, how do we transfer this, which one needs to go to the RAM, which one needs to go to the hard drive, which one needs to be executed, and all that. It also manages and coordinates all the units of the computer. Okay, it's there to manage the units within the computer. The units, we are talking of the input and output unit, we are talking of the memory unit, we are talking of any other units that you can think of that is within the computer. Now, it obtains the instructions from the memory interrupters, like we're talking about the interrupters, of course, interrupt them, and then direct the operations of the computer. It's like this control unit is like a manager or probably a leader within the computer, because it's the one who said, hey, you does this, you do this, you come here, when in terms of instructions. Then it communicates input and output devices to transfer of data and results from the storage. It does the communication. And it does not process or store data. That is very, very important thing that you need to understand about the control unit. So control units are in two parts, okay? It's having two types, okay? So the two types of control units are, we have a hardware control unit, and This hardware control unit is implemented using various electronic components, such as a combinational logic unit and gates. Remember when we're doing the logic gates, we're doing the AND, the OR, the XOR, and we could combine them. So that is what this electronic component is implemented using that. Now this circuit uses a fixed architecture, right? And if instruction set is changed, the wiring should also change. The instruction sets within the CPU, if they change, just know that it's also going to change. So what you need to know, this is implemented using some various combination of logic gates. And of course, this is a hard wire control unit. Okay, when it comes to microprogram control unit, this now unit is more of those binary controls variables are stored in the memory. So these ones are not implemented using some logic circuits, the combination of gates. No, these ones are stored on the memory. Okay, and they are, and these are binary controlled. So that is the difference between a wired and micro-programmed control unit. So it uses sequence of micro instructions, okay, of micro instructions in the micro programming language. This is just micro instructions within the CPU itself, because the CPU is also called the microprocessor. So that is the job. It acts as a midway between the hardware as well as the software. So it is the one that now convey between the hardware as well as the software. So these are the two types of control unit, which is the hardware and the microprogrammed control unit. So let's now come to the last part of the CPU, which is the arithmetic logic unit, the ALU. The arithmetic logic control actually arithmetic as well as the logic operation. And it represents the fundamental building block of the central processing unit. So this is a fundamental building block. Okay. So it is the fundamental, this is the fundamental building block, okay, of the CPU. And the other one is a manager, which is a control unit, is there to control and manage and coordinate all the instrument execution within a computer unit. But when operation on arithmetic logic unit. So and they're saying that the modern CPUs contain a very powerful complex ALUs. Now the ALUs, like arithmetic logic unit, it's made out of two sections. One section is for arithmetic, the other section is for logic. Okay, and what is the difference between these two? The difference are that the arithmetic section, functions of the arithmetic section is to perform arithmetic operations. You are talking of additions, we are talking of subtractions, divisions, and so forth. That is their job. Okay, all the complex operations are done by making repetitive use of the above operations on binary numbers. So I hope you remember when we are talking about binaries, you could divide, you could multiply. This job is done by the arithmetic section of the arithmetic logic unit within the CPU. And the last thing that it does is a logic section. It's a logic section of performing logic operations, such as comparing, selecting, okay? So matching and merging of data. So these are the examples such as AND, all. So these are the logic operations that the CPU uses. Okay, and they're actually performed by the logic session part of it. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this particular unit, and that is where we got all our resources. So thank you for listening, and I'll meet you in class for any of the questions. Until next time, bye.